What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Feels good to be going back live. We didn't go live last week because I had a lot of assignments that I was trying to get done. If you didn't know, I'm in college and we're coming up upon the end of this semester. So I wanted to get those assignments out the way. So for this whole entire week, didn't really have to worry about too much work, and I can come on here and go live for you guys. We got a good episode tonight. Got my reaction to the Eagles taking down the Kansas City Chiefs. I wouldn't really call it a Super Bowl rematch because nobody won a ring or was hoisting the Lombardi after this game, but it was definitely a really good win for the Eagles. Devastating loss for Kansas City. We're going to get into that. Also, got to give my thoughts on Brandon Staley, the Jets benching Zach Wilson, Kenny Pickett. He's not good enough to be the starting quarterback for the Steelers, not just for this season, but for the foreseeable future. Lincoln Riley's future at USC. They lost to UCLA in humiliating fashion. And there's a couple of more topics that we're going to touch on tonight's episode. Welcome to everybody that's tuned in live. If you haven't already, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that every episode of the podcast is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon. Wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the JT Sports Podcast. Leave us with a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. Share this episode with your friends, family members, and acquaintances if you enjoy and you want to help support the pod. The Eagles take down Kansas City 21-17. I wouldn't really call this a Super Bowl rematch per se because the Eagles aren't hoisting up the Lombardi trophy after winning this game, but you feel really good about their chances of being able to win it all after this win. Let's start off with the Eagles, all right? This wasn't a good offensive display that we saw out of Jalen Hurts and this Eagles offense. This offensive line played as bad as what I've seen out of them the last two seasons. Kansas City got consistent pressure on Jalen Hurts in the first half of this game. And there was one moment in the second quarter when Chris Jones just went berserker mode. He had 2 straight sacks on 2 straight plays. They had a hard time slowing him down in the first half. And then in the second half, this offensive line, they played a little bit better, but this passing game couldn't really get anything going outside of that big play to Devontae Smith, which set them up to get a short yardage touchdown. Philadelphia's passing game was not that good in this matchup. All right, Kansas City's defense definitely came to play in this game, but the Eagles' defense, they came to play as well. Patrick Mahomes, for some reason, they had a hard time finding ways to get him off the field in third down situations up until the closing minutes of the fourth quarter. And Philadelphia's defense, you got to give them a lot of props for keeping them in this game, because with the way that the Eagles offense played, I didn't really think that the Chiefs were going to lose this game, especially when they went into halftime with that 17-7 lead. And the way that these Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers played in the second half is like Kansas City really needs to go out there and try to find a significant upgrade to their wide receiving core this offseason. You had the big drop late by NVS. Travis Kelce had a drop. It just wasn't a good performance out of these Chiefs wide receivers. And it's a large reason why I don't think the Chiefs are the best team in the AFC right now. I still have to give it to the Ravens. And with this loss, the Ravens are now in full control of the number 1 seed in the AFC conference. Kansas City, they got a great defense. They got Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Andy Reid and Isaiah Pacheco, but that's about it. And when you look at the way Kansas City's offense stacks up amongst the other teams in the AFC, like the Ravens, the Jaguars, I don't think they got enough firepower to outduel those teams. At the end of the day, yeah, you still have the 3 main cores, but you still need a little bit more talent for Mahomes to be able to take you the distance this year, especially if you don't get that number 1 seed. Kansas City has had the luxury the last couple of years of being able to have that number 1 seed, not having to play a road playoff game, and it's been a huge benefit to their Super Bowl runs. But this season, with how great the quarterback competition is compared to Patrick Mahomes, like, we know Patrick Mahomes is the best QB in the game, but I don't think the gap between him and the rest of the other quarterbacks in the AFC is this wide as what people may think. And for Philadelphia, I really didn't understand why they didn't choose to give DeAndre Swift more carries in this game. The offense should have ran through him. Although they won this game, kudos to them, but DeAndre Swift was really the most consistent weapon that they had offensively, and for some reason, in the second half, they just went away from him. Now, he did have a big 30-something yard run, but outside of that, they didn't really utilize him as much as what they should have. When the passing game wasn't working, they should have immediately went to the run game. The run game, they had a good amount of success with. Kansas City's defense did all they could to make sure that Jalen Hurts didn't kill them with his ability to get outside the pocket and extend plays. Mahomes did a really good job at that, but we didn't really see too much of the playmaking ability out of Jalen Hurts in this game. This passing game, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith and company, they were held in check for the most part. But in the second half, although this wasn't a great performance out of the Eagles offense, they came through in a big way when it mattered the most, especially in the fourth quarter. Philadelphia outplayed Kansas City for the majority of the second half. Kansas City got shut out. They scored no points in the second half of this ball game. And for Philadelphia, after you got the Travis Kelce fumble, you thought that the momentum would have tilted on your side, but you went 3-and-out after that. And I was pretty confident once they went 3-and-out after that Travis Kelce fumble in the red zone that they weren't going to win this game. But to their credit, their defense still was able to keep them in this game. They got to stop. Yes, Kansas City gave you some assists. You had a lot of drop passes. You had red zone turnovers. Let's not forget about Patrick Mahomes' red zone interception when he was trying to hit Watson, and it was a great play by Kevin Byard to undercut the route. Red zone turnovers and drops killed Kansas City in this game. But Philadelphia, they didn't really make the most out of those turnovers. Let's just be honest about this. Philadelphia, in this game, they won it because of their defense. That big play to Devontae Smith, which led to that touchdown to make it 14-17, was huge. All right? But then Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts, in the closing minutes of the fourth quarter, they were able to sustain enough offense that they were able to go up 21-17. And then it came down to if Mahomes was going to be able to pull off another fourth quarter comeback. And anytime you give Mahomes the ball with 2 minutes or less left on the clock, you feel pretty confident about his ability to pull through and get Kansas City the victory. And I thought that the Eagles were going to need their offense to come through in the last couple of minutes in this game to be able to pull off the win. But their defense, they came up huge in this game. This has to be Philly's best performance on defense that they've had all season long. To have this kind of performance against the Kansas City Chiefs, regardless of the drops that they had in the red zone turnovers, it was huge. Kansas City's pass rush, they were getting after Jalen Hurts in the first half. Philadelphia's pass rush, they couldn't find a way to get Mahomes off the field in the third quarter. Well, on third down, In third down situations, Mahomes was money every single time. He was making guys miss. He was picking up first downs with his legs, or he was getting on the run and finding guys open. But for Philadelphia's defense to tighten down in the fourth quarter and to find a way to stop Kansas City from going ahead and scoring a touchdown to win this game, you have to give a lot of credit to their defensive coordinator. This defense has not been that great this year, at least compared to the level that they performed at last season. But this was a huge stand that this defense made late in this game to give Philadelphia the win. When we talk about the implications of this win for Philadelphia, not too much needs to be said about them. They're 9-1. They got the best record in the NFL. And once again, it looks like they're going to be in control of the 1 seed in the NFC. If you want to get out of this conference, you got to make it out of Philly. Meanwhile, for Kansas City, you can't say the same thing. As I mentioned earlier, a large reason why Kansas City has had so much success in the postseason is because they don't have to go on the road. This season, though, it probably could be a little bit different because now you fall to 7-3, and the Ravens are 8-3, so they're ahead of you right now. And the Dolphins also are 7-3; they're tied with you. Now the Dolphins, you hold the tiebreak over them because you beat them. But if the Dolphins continue to play good football and they beat up on bad teams and they can find a way to beat a good team or two, I think Kansas City is going to find themselves playing on the road, playing the wild card weekend, and not having the luxury of getting that first round bye and not being able to play at home. Kansas City, they got a great defense, but their offense is not as good as what it has been in the past. And although the Patriots haven't won Super Bowls back in their glory days during the Tom Brady and Bill Belichick dynasty, they didn't always have stacked rosters when they won championships. The majority of times when they won Super Bowls, their teams weren't that great, at least on paper when you look at what they had to work with offensively. Kansas City, you wonder if they can be able to win a Super Bowl this season the same way. I strongly doubt that. The Ravens have a way better roster top to bottom than Kansas City, and I don't think the Jacksonville Jaguars, when you look at the weapons that Trevor Lawrence has to throw to, Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, and Christian Kirk, are too far off from what Kansas City has. I probably would take Jacksonville's offense over Kansas City. Their offensive line isn't great. They can run the football more, and they probably need to lean into running the football a lot more with Isaiah Pacheco because he was great tonight. The run game for Kansas City definitely was there. I wonder why they didn't lean into the run game a lot more in the second half. They kind of got away from that, just like how Philadelphia got away from DeAndre Swift. But the difference in this game was the fact that Philadelphia, they were able to come alive and get enough points. And this defense was able to keep Patrick Mahomes from pulling off the magic that he normally is able to pull off consistently with the ball in his hands with an opportunity to win the game. Philadelphia, they came to play defensively in this game, and this was their best defensive performance all season long. So Philadelphia, they walk away. They improved to 9-1 with this win over Kansas City, and the Chiefs fall to 7-3 on the year. The LA Chargers suffered a really shocking loss to the Green Bay Packers, and after their loss, Brandon Staley had one of the most toxic post-game press conferences that I've ever seen in all my years watching the NFL. So it's funny how he wants to call out the offense for Austin Eckler's fumble and the drops that they had. Quentin Johnston had a really big drop in this game. But then he takes no accountability for his defense getting carved up by Jordan Love. The Packers offense has not been that good this season, and Jordan Love has been really inconsistent. So the fact that Brandon Staley's defense allowed for Jordan Love to throw for 322 passing yards and 2 touchdowns with no pick, you would think that he would come on and say, yeah, our defense needs to play better. But instead, he says this.
I have full confidence, like I've told you, and like I've told you from the beginning, I have full confidence in our way of playing. Full confidence in myself as the play caller, and the way that we teach, and the way that we scheme. Full confidence in that. We got to bring this group together and do it consistently, okay? And that's where it's at. So you can stop asking that question, okay? I'm going to be calling the defenses, okay? So we're clear. So you don't have to ask that again.
Okay, Brandon Staley, we hear you loud and clear. You're going to keep calling these plays, and you got all this confidence in your sorry-ass defense. The Chargers need to fire this dude ASAP, expeditiously, immediately. If the Raiders can fire Josh McDaniels at 1 a.m. in the morning after a disappointing loss to the Detroit Lions on Monday night, why can't the Chargers do the same? You got a better chance of keeping your playoff hopes alive with Kellen Moore taking over as the interim head coach than Brandon Staley remaining the head coach, because this dude's defenses are Swiss cheese. If you're getting carved up by Jordan Love, you should not be calling the plays, okay? And Brandon Staley, you know, his defenses are so bad, it's to the point when if you're a Chargers fan, you kind of feel like you could do no worse than what Brandon Staley has done. And Joey Bosa left this game to injury. He got placed on injury reserve, so he's going to miss a lot of time, if not the remainder of this season. This defense has way too much talent to perform the way that they've had under Brandon Staley the last couple of years. He's the worst head coach in the NFL. I've been saying it since last season. There's no reason why this dude should still have a job. They need to revoke his access to the facilities, and he needs the pink slip. He should be fired on his day off. Anytime you have a head coach that refuses to take accountability and look at himself in the mirror and say, you know what? I'm the problem. I need to make a change. That's a huge red flag. Another red flag is that you have somebody who specializes in the defense side of the football, and the worst part of your team is the defense. Not just that, but this team constantly can't get it done in the closing minutes of games. Anytime the Chargers are in a one-possession game, it's a pretty easy bet to pick them to not come through. Justin Herbert, I hate the fact that he gets so much criticism due to the Chargers' shortcoming when really it's due to Brandon Staley. You can't blame Justin Herbert for this defense giving up 322 passing yards and 2 touchdowns and no picks to Jordan Love. You can't blame Justin Herbert for that big drop by Quentin Johnston or that fumble by Austin Eckler. You can call him overrated all you want to, but he's still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And regardless of how talented you are as a QB, you still need a competent coaching staff. When you think about some of the best coaches that ever play in the NFL, that ever coach in the NFL, what do they all have in common? Great quarterbacks: Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, Sean Payton, Drew Brees, Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll. The majority of the greatest coaches that ever coach in the NFL have had great quarterbacks, or at least competent quarterback play. Justin Herbert, for him to be able to have more success and for him to lead the Chargers to deep playoff runs, they need a better head coach. But this ownership is so damn cheap that they refuse to go out there and get one. And Justin Herbert, it looks like his career is going to suffer the same fate that Phillip Rivers' career suffered. And Justin Herbert is better than Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers, he was a really good quarterback, but he's nowhere as talented as what Justin Herbert is. And you know who the Chargers play this week? They got to play the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens, if you're a Chargers fan, you should be rooting for your team to get blown the hell out. So now the ownership has no choice but to cut bait with Brandon Staley. Now, if memory serves me correctly, the Chargers ownership, they're not one to cut ties with a head coach in the middle of the season. All right, because when people wanted Anthony Lynn fired, they were reluctant to fire him during the season. And you probably can expect them to have the same level of patience with Brandon Staley, because maybe there's a little bit of hope that he can turn this thing around, but this looks like a sinking ship, people. This is the Titanic, and the Chargers have crashed into an iceberg. And this ship has been sinking way before this season even started. The ship was sinking when they blew that big-ass lead to the Jacksonville Jaguars in the wild card round last year. I thought for sure Brandon Staley was going to be on his way out and that they were going to go out there and get Sean Payton. All they had to do was give up a first-round pick to New Orleans and give him a pretty lucrative deal. It may not have had to been the same amount that the Broncos gave him, because you got to remember that Sean Payton, he loves the LA area. And plus, he was working for Fox at the time, which happens to be in the same proximity. So he wouldn't have to do too much relocating, too much moving, and it could have been an easy transition. Plus, he would have had Justin Herbert and a really talented roster to work with. You automatically would have been one of the top contenders to win it all this season if you had Sean Payton as your head coach. But instead, you decide to give Brandon Staley another year. He brings in Kellen Moore's OC, which is the only good thing about this team, which has been Kellen Moore's play calling, but that's about it. Sean Payton would have made the Chargers a legitimate Super Bowl contender this year. He would have been the missing piece to the Chargers being able to have success with this talented quarterback and Justin Herbert. But instead, Sean Payton goes to Denver. Denver pays him the farm to come coach that team, and he had to get that much money to go up there and coach Denver because nobody really wanted to go coach that situation. Nobody thought that you could fix Russell Wilson. But Sean Payton has done God's work, and he's fixed Russ, something that nobody really thought was possible. So if Sean Payton can have this amount of success with the Broncos and turn their season around and fix Russell Wilson, which was an all-time big mistake, it was going to take an all-time great head coach to fix it. Imagine if the Chargers would have gone ahead and hired Sean Payton, and you didn't have to pay him as much as what the Broncos were, because the Broncos had to kind of sweeten the deal to force him to come out of retirement and to force him to coach a situation that nobody really saw had a lot of hope in terms of being able to win immediately. Brandon Staley, he won't give up the defensive play calling, and the Chargers ownership won't give up on, making Justin Herbert's life more difficult than what it already is. There's only so much the dude can do. Hell, if Justin Herbert could play cornerback and defensive back, I'm pretty sure he would. If he could call the plays on defense and he was good at it, I'm pretty sure he would do that also. Most head coaches, when they struggle calling plays and they specialize on that side of football, they give up play calling. Frank Reich gave up play calling at one point, although he took it back over. But the sign of a great head coach is being able to be accountable, understanding when you're not good at something and when you need to hand the responsibilities off to somebody else who can have the ability to do it better than you. Brandon Staley, he doesn't take any accountability for his awful defense. He doesn't take any accountability for his bad play calling. He won't give it up, and it's costing this team. His ego is costing the LA Chargers. And it's really unfortunate, because this is a team that you look at on paper coming into this season and you feel like they can win it all. I didn't even have the Chargers making it to the postseason this year or having a winning record. When I had them going 7-10, people thought I was crazy. And you would think that despite how bad of a coach Brandon Staley is, that the talent would be able to overcome his bad coaching. But it goes back to those days when Jason Garrett was the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. It doesn't matter how good of a roster you have if you have an average or below average head coach. This is why the Chargers remain to be relevant when it comes to the Super Bowl conversation, despite the fact that they're playing in one of the biggest markets in the world, Los Angeles. They can't even sell out games. Anytime the Chargers are playing at home, it turns into a away game for them. You want to know why? Because they don't give the fans any reason to show up. And why would you show up when you continue to have Brandon Staley, an ass head coach, and an ass play caller on the defense side of the football calling plays? This defense continues to be trash. Their best performance was against Tyson Bagent, an undrafted rookie free agent who was playing, Division II, Division III football around this time last year? That was their best performance. You see, they can play good against backups, but they can't play good against starting caliber QBs. The fact that Jordan Love, out of all quarterbacks, destroyed this defense shows you how bad of a play caller Brandon Staley is. This dude had one good season, that's the DC for the Rams, and he gets hired by the Chargers. And this defense is just a complete travesty, an absolute disaster. Brandon Staley delivered the most toxic post-game press conference that I've seen all season long. Zero accountability, zero responsibility, scapegoats his offense. He puts the blame on the offense for their drops and their turnovers and not the defense playing like shit. Unbelievable. Brandon Staley should be fired expeditiously, but it looks like the Chargers are just dragging their feet. And you wonder how long and how many losses is it going to take for them to finally pull the trigger, when they should have pulled the trigger after last season when they lost to Jacksonville the way they did in the wild card round. Now, while we're talking about trash, the New York Jets finally took out the trash, people. The New York Jets have officially benched Zach Wilson. The Zach Wilson era, not era, people, era, ERROR, looks like it's coming to an end. They're starting Tim Boyle over him, and their Friday game against the Miami Dolphins. Listen, people, I don't get why Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas remain so committed to a guy that hasn't shown you any reason to keep throwing him out there. Zach Wilson And all the years that he's been starting at QB for the Jets has shown zero promise. The best game he ever had was against the Kansas City Chiefs. And even with them having his best game ever, they still lost that game because he turned it over in the closing moments. I'm so happy that the New York Jets are opting to start somebody else. Even though Tim Boyle probably won't be that better, you got to send a message to the locker room that you no longer are going to play politics. Because that's basically what it was. Any single week the Jets chose to start Zach Wilson after Aaron Rodgers got injured was politicking. After the third or fourth week when Zach Wilson showed you that he didn't have what it takes to keep your season afloat, you should have benched him. Despite how bad Tim Boyle may be, the locker room needed to see somebody else there at quarterback because it shows you that you're being accountable and you're not playing favorites. The more games Zach Wilson starts at quarterback for the Jets, the more divided this locker room was going to become. They had a players-only meeting last week after they lost on Sunday night to the Las Vegas Raiders, and I said that players-only meeting was pretty pointless because what was it going to solve? The biggest problem with the Jets offense this year, outside of the offensive line and lack of talent that they have at receiver, is Nathaniel Hackett and Zach Wilson. When Aaron Rodgers got injured 3 plays into that Buffalo game, those coaches, after winning that game, they couldn't sleep that night. You want to know why? Because there was a lot of hope and optimism about the Jets coming into this season because of them getting Aaron Rodgers. And with Aaron Rodgers not being there, there was no way this team was going to be able to have success without him. And it's not like this team was going to be all that great even with Aaron Rodgers. It's just that you expected for Aaron Rodgers to be good enough to kind of be able to overcome the limitations that the Jets had. And plus, this was a team that was built for Aaron Rodgers. That's why they went out there and they hired Nathaniel Hackett. And they got all these guys that Aaron Rodgers recommended them going out to sign. And now that he's not there, this team has been a complete mess. Now, benching Zach Wilson, I don't think the offense is going to be that much better, but at least you got a new face out there, and now the defense doesn't have to be frustrated with continuing to see Zach Wilson out there and stinking it up. You see, it's a difference when a team's struggling and they attempt to make changes versus throwing out the same guy every single week and getting the same results. That's an easy way to lose your locker room if you're Robert Saleh. And if you would have chose to start Zach Wilson this week against the Miami Dolphins, this locker room probably would have even turned on you a lot more than what they already have. Zach Wilson, this dude is not NFL starting quarterback material. At best, he can be a decent backup. And when you think about what's next for Zach Wilson after this, obviously he's not going to start again for the Jets unless Tim Boyle gets injured. Regardless of how bad Tim Boyle plays, Zach Wilson should not touch the football ever again for the New York Jets. And I was really shocked that they didn't try to trade for a quarterback at the trade deadline. Imagine if they would have had Joshua Dobbs, or if you would have got Gardner Minshew, or even Marcus Mariota. Any of those 3 options or anybody else would be better than what you have at the helm than Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson is not it. He has a great arm. He does have the ability to be a really good athlete at times and extend plays and pick up yards with his legs, but he can't read defenses. He's inaccurate. Garrett Wilson, the NFL posted a highlight of him running a phenomenal route, getting wide open, and yet they cut the route off as soon as he got open. You want to know why? Because Zach Wilson didn't throw him the damn football. And even when Garrett Wilson gets open and Zach Wilson throws him the football, he can't throw him an accurate pass to save his life. He just doesn't have what it takes to be a starting quarterback in this league. And coming out of BYU in that draft, I was really high on Zach Wilson. I thought that he had what it took to be the next Mahomes because of his ability to get outside the pocket and make all these great throws downfield. But it turns out I was wrong because a lot of that he did at BYU doesn't translate to success in the NFL. And Zach Wilson, his career playing out the way that it has, him essentially being a bust at this point, pretty much, has forced me to reevaluate the way that I go about scouting quarterbacks. Now, For me to have a first-round grade on you, I got to see more than just a grade arm and athleticism. I got to see your ability to process defenses. I got to see your ability to deliver accurate passes downfield and be able to win from within the pocket. You know, Anthony Richardson, he was a phenomaly because this dude is 6'4", 6'5", 255, running 4.43. And he has a rifle for an arm, and also he has really good intangibles. Zach Wilson, he doesn't have good intangibles. He doesn't have the study habits that you need to become a starting caliber NFL QB. And the New York Jets thought that trading for Aaron Rodgers, not only would it give them a better chance of making it to the playoffs, but it also would help Zach Wilson develop. Maybe Aaron Rodgers will rub off on Zach Wilson, and you could possibly get 5% of Aaron Rodgers and Zach Wilson this year with Aaron Rodgers' presence. But that didn't work out the way that they envisioned. Zach Wilson is garbage. And I'm glad that the New York Jets finally cut the bullshit and they finally stopped politicking and they finally put this dude on the bench where he belongs. Zach Wilson belongs on the bench as a backup quarterback. And even then, if you were to ask me where does Zach Wilson rank amongst backup quarterbacks in the league, he doesn't even rank in the top 5, top 10, or the top 15. There are 15 other backup quarterbacks that I'd rather have than Zach Wilson. Imagine if the Jets would have had Jacoby Brissett this year. Oh my God, if you had Jacoby Brissett, you would have been straight. Hell, Kenny Pickett. Well, I'm not going to go that far because Kenny Pickett, we're going to get into him a little bit later too. He's not even that better than Zach Wilson, but at least he gives the Jets a better chance. I'd rather have Kenny Pickett than Zach Wilson any day of the week. Hell, give me Desmond Ridder over Zach Wilson. Bryce Young over Zach Wilson. Like, this dude is so garbage. I don't understand how he's been able to be the starting quarterback of the New York Jets for this long before it took them saying, you know what, this is it. We're getting beat to hell by the Buffalo Bills. We need to make a change. What took them so long? It took them getting blown out by Buffalo for Robert Saleh to stop being delusional and realize that this dude, Zach Wilson, is not it. I don't know if Robert Saleh thought that eventually 1 week out of nowhere, Zach Wilson was miraculously going to figure it out and he was just going to become the quarterback that you envisioned him becoming when you drafted him a couple of years ago. But you know what they say? Better late than never. But in this situation, you bench Zach Wilson too late. Because at this point, your season is over. There's no way the Jets are going to be able to remain in playoff contention when they got to play the Dolphins this week. And Aaron Rodgers isn't expected to return until week 16. You should have went out there and traded for a quarterback at the trade deadline. But instead, you say, oh, well, Zach Wilson knows the playbook. There's not really anybody else out there who could come in and learn enough of the playbook in time in terms of giving us a chance to win. That's bullshit, man. What Robert Saleh was doing was politicking, and that's why there was growing frustrations in the locker room, even if Tim Boyle isn't good. The players rather have him out there that continue to throw out the same nonsense at quarterback that they've been doing the last 2 years. This dude costed the Jets a spot in the postseason last year. And he did the same thing this season. And the players, they see favoritism. They don't like favoritism. Players like being held accountable and everybody else being held accountable in the same fashion, regardless of how good the quarterback is. That's why you didn't have so many locker room controversies with the Patriots, because Bill Belichick treated Tom Brady the same way he treated everybody else in the locker room. When Tom Brady was getting cussed out, everybody else was getting the same cussings too. And with this whole Zach Wilson, New York Jets saga, they did a really poor job at managing this, because this locker room grew so frustrated that they're having players only meeting when the only thing to discuss is how can you overcome having an awful quarterback and Zach Wilson throwing you passes. Like, if I was a player in this locker room and I was Sauce Gardner and company, I would have took a stand to this. I would have went right to Robert Saleh and I would have said, now you know you're dead wrong for continuing to throw out that abysmal quarterback every single week. You really think that Zach Wilson, this garbage, gives us the best chance to win? What the hell is wrong with you? I would have looked at Robert Saleh dead in his eyes and I would have asked him that question, man to man, what's wrong with you? Because as a player, like, There's no way you can tolerate this. You're doing everything you can to help your team win games, and yet your coach keeps throwing out a quarterback that puts you at a disadvantage. Like, this is embarrassing that it took the Jets this long to make this decision. And if it wasn't for them getting Aaron Rodgers, Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas, they should get the door. Joe Douglas has done a really good job at drafting, but when it comes to their free agency acquisitions, they haven't been great. And Robert Saleh, he's a good defensive-minded coach, and he's a guy that a lot of players in the locker room love. But when you politic the way that the Jets did with this Zach Wilson situation, being reluctant and waiting too long to bench him, the players, they lose respect for you because you're not holding Zach Wilson accountable as you are the rest of the team. You see, if anybody else plays bad at their position, as bad as what Zach Wilson has, they get benched in about 4 or 5 games. So the fact that they were throwing Zach Wilson out there just because where they drafted him shows that they were playing politics. And the best way to lose a locker room is when you play politics. And also playing politics is also what costs you to miss out on the playoffs. The best coaches in the league, they're not afraid to bench somebody that they drafted in the first round. And I'm eager to see if Mike Tomlin is going to do the same thing with Kenny Pickett eventually. But I'm happy, despite not being a New York Jets fan, that they finally have chose to take out the trash. You know, what they need to do with Zach Wilson is what I used to do every Sunday night when I was staying at my mom before I graduated high school and came down to college. They need to put Zach Wilson in the garbage, set that thing on the side of the road, and wait for the garbage people to come pick him up in the morning. Kenny Pickett, I need this dude out of Pittsburgh immediately. All right? He's not it. And you can blame Matt Canada's play calling all you want to for the reason why Kenny Pickett has looked as bad as what he's looked since he got drafted by Pittsburgh. But you can only blame Matt Canada so much when you got Kenny Pickett who's overthrowing wide open wide receivers on 5 to 6 yard crossing routes. Nearly every game that I've watched Kenny Pickett play this season, he's overthrown at least 3-4 wide receivers on slants, crossing routes, or out routes when they've been wide the hell open. And Deontay Johnson, he had a moment during this game when he got into it with the assistant coach on the coaching staff, and the players had to hold him back, and Mike Tomlin had to bring him over and talk to him to calm him down. These are the kind of frustrations that you have on your team when you have a trash quarterback. All right? Now, I like Kenny Pickett. This dude does seem like he puts in a lot of effort. He does put in a lot of time and commitment, but something isn't clicking. And eventually, you got to look at yourself in the mirror if you're Mike Tomlin and say, you know what? We made a mistake. We need to bench this dude because he's not it. And regardless of how you feel about Kenny Pickett and how good of a person he is, look, I like Kenny Pickett as a person. If I was to sit down with Kenny Pickett, I would have no problem drinking a whole bottle of Don Julio or Ciroc with him. He's the kind of person that he's good to have in the locker room because players like him. But being a likable player doesn't result to you being a good quarterback majority of the time. You still have to go out there and you have to be able to execute. And Kenny Pickett doesn't do a good job at that. And at this point, Kenny Pickett, it's safe to say that this dude is not a starting caliber QB. You can blame Matt Canada all you want to, but I'm not going to put Matt Canada at fault for Kenny Pickett not being able to hit open wide receivers when they're 5 to 6 yards down the field. You should at least be able to hit a 5-6 yard slant consistently, especially if the dude is wide open. This dude got outplayed by Dorian Thompson-Robinson, fam. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a rookie quarterback who is a mid-round selection. And yet, Kenny Pickett barely was able to get over 100 yards passing. Now, we got to give a lot of props to how good the Browns defense has been, but Kenny Pickett has been putting up these pedestrian performances all season long. There has been no growth out of Kenny Pickett. Yes, Matt Canada is a big reason why Kenny Pickett isn't playing good, but even with a better offensive coordinator, you're going to need to find the next, Bruce Arians for Kenny Pickett to look like a serviceable quarterback in the league. Even if Pittsburgh were to have a better OC, Kenny Pickett wouldn't be no better than a top 23 quarterback in the league. I'd rather have Bryce Young over Kenny Pickett. Like, I'd rather have Joshua Dobbs, Desmond Ridder, than having Kenny Pickett at the helm at QB. This dude just is not it. He doesn't really do a good job at reading defenses. He has a noodle arm. The only thing that makes Kenny Pickett a quarterback worth starting is that this dude is really scrappy. I give him that. I love a quarterback that plays through injuries, that's willing to put their body on the line. Kenny Pickett's best throw last week against the Cleveland Browns was that screen pass that he threw to Jalen Warren. The only pass that Kenny Pickett knows how to throw with consistent accuracy is those damn screen passes. He'll throw those with accuracy all game long, but you ask him to throw a 6-yard crossing route to a wide open Deontay Johnson, he can't do it. You ask him to throw a consistent post route downfield to George Pickens, he doesn't have the arm strength to get it there. There's only so much blame that we can put on Matt Canada without realizing that this dude isn't it. And even with the better offensive coordinator when the Steelers get one, Kenny Pickett, he's not good enough to lead the Steelers to a Super Bowl. Let's not just focus on this season. Let's focus on the long-term implications of Kenny Pickett being the starting quarterback for Pittsburgh. Because you look at the AFC North, you got to go up against Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow twice every single season. Kenny Pickett isn't good enough to outdo those guys unless you just have the best roster in the NFL. And the Steelers have a really good team. But it's like you need a lot to be able to win a Super Bowl with a guy like Kenny Pickett. And I get tired of hearing this whole narrative about, man, you don't need to have a superstar quarterback to win a Super Bowl. The Ravens won the Super Bowl with Joe Flacco. The 49ers went to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. They're winning with Brock Purdy. Let me tell you something. In the year 2023, if you don't have an elite quarterback, your chances of winning the Super Bowl are incredibly thin. Not everybody has a Kyle Shanahan or a 49ers caliber roster that can elevate the quarterback. You're playing in the fucking AFC, people. The majority of the NFL's best quarterbacks play in this conference. And you're not going to be able to make it out with the Kenny Pickett when you're in the playoffs and you got to go against Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, or CJ Stroud. Like, the people who continue to defend Kenny Pickett by saying he does need to be great for the Steelers to win it all, you're stuck in 2010, people. Wake up. We're in 2023. You need a great quarterback if you want to be able to be in the Super Bowl conversation. Prime example, the NFC. There's not a lot of elite quarterbacks in the NFC. The only elite quarterback in the NFC is Jalen Hurts. And then you got really good quarterbacks like Jared Goff and Brock Purdy. But guess who has the best record in the NFC right now? The Philadephia Eagles. Guess who had the number 1 seed in the NFC last year? The Philadelphia Eagles. Guess who went to the Super Bowl last year? The Philadelphia Eagles. And a large reason for that is because Jalen Hurts is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. You see, when you have a great quarterback, not only does he elevate the guy calling the plays, but he also makes the team better. And you also have somebody who you can believe in, who the team can rally behind. Nobody is rallying behind Kenny Pickett. The only reason the Steelers play so hard is because of Mike Tomlin being such a good coach. And the only reason why the Steelers can afford whiffing on Kenny Pickett, because most of the times when you whiff on the quarterback, it sets your franchise back 3 to 5 years, and 95% of the time, you miss on a quarterback in the first round, if you're a head coach, you're out of a job. The fact that Mike Tomlin is still able to have the Steelers in the thick of the playoff race is due to how good of a coach he is. And the fact that he can just find ways to win despite having garbage at quarterback. I like Kenny Pickett as a person. I don't want to make it seem like this is a personal assault on him. I'm only talking about Kenny Pickett, the player, because Kenny Pickett, the quarterback, is terrible. I don't get why so many people continue to make excuses out of excuses after excuses for this dude. Like, we get it. Matt Canada sucks. He blows. But instead of chanting, fire Matt Canada at games, we need to be chanting, bench Kenny Pickett and draft a new quarterback. Bruh, I pray to the football gods every night that Mike Tomlin doesn't give Kenny Pickett a third season. I'd rather go out there and trade up for a Caleb Williams, a Drake May, or hell, even a Bo Nix or Michael Penix. Give us one of those guys and I'll be satisfied, because Kenny Pickett is not the solution. Kenny Pickett with a better offensive coordinator, you'll be able to make it to the postseason with that. I'm not denying that the offensive coordinator, or the lack thereof of a good one, is holding back Kenny Pickett and it's hurting his development. But people make it seem like Kenny Pickett with a better OC is going to go from arguably the worst quarterback in the NFL to one of the best in the league. That's not going to happen. Kenny Pickett, his potential coming out of Pitt, at best, was a top 16, top 17 quarterback. And you felt like that was good enough with the brand of football that the Steelers play. Leaning on great defense, being physical at the point of attack, and having a great rushing attack. But in today's age of the NFL, when it's a passing league, you need a great quarterback to be able to win. So Mike Tomlin, if you're watching this, I'm begging you, I'm pleading to you, please go out there and get another quarterback. Draft one. Hell, it would be my dream for Caleb Williams to be wearing the black and gold. I don't care about the character issues, man. I need some talent back there at quarterback. Kenny Pickett doesn't have it. The only thing this dude has is scrappiness. And I respect that. And Kenny Pickett, it's so weird watching this dude play, because he'll stink it up for the first 3 quarters, but then in the 4th quarter when the game is on the line, he plays his best football. We didn't see that against Cleveland, but that's been the story of Kenny Pickett's career. He'll play garbage for 3 quarters, and then he'll wake up for 4 quarters. The Steelers need a quarterback that can play good for a full game, for the whole entire 60 minutes, and Kenny Pickett doesn't do that. The only thing he does better than Mitchell Trubisky and Mason Rudolph, and the reason why you can't bench Kenny Pickett, is because he takes care of the football. Mitch Trubisky doesn't do that, and neither does Mason Rudolph. And with the style of football that the Steelers like to play, over-relying on their defense to carry the load and winning the field position battle on special teams, you can't afford turnovers. And that's something that Kenny Pickett does a really good job at doing. Taking care of the football, minimizing mistakes. But at the same time, even though he doesn't turn the football over, he doesn't do much for you offensively. He's not a great athlete. The only thing he has is scrappiness and toughness. And like I said, I respect that. But scrappiness and toughness doesn't win you championships. We went from Big Ben, a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest quarterbacks of this generation, to one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. You literally can make a legitimate argument about who's better, Kenny Pickett or Zach Wilson. I think you couldn't go wrong saying that Zach Wilson is just as bad as Kenny Pickett. I mean, I'd rather have Tommy DeVito than Kenny Pickett. Hell, give me Sam Howell over Kenny Pickett. Sam Howell with Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and a better offensive line and a competent coaching staff? There's no way you can't tell me the Steelers wouldn't be in contention for the 1 seat with Sam Howell. The Steelers don't need to have an insanely great quarterback to be a competitive football team or to be a playoff football team, but they definitely need a good one if they want to try to get their 7th Super Bowl. I've been a Steelers fan all my life. I've been a Steelers fan since 2009, people. And the most success that this team has had when I was in 3rd, 4th grade. I'm 21 years old now. And the closest that I've ever seen the Steelers come to winning a Super Bowl over the last couple of years was when we got blown the hell out by the New England Patriots in the AFC Championship game. You know, I like Mike Tomlin as a coach, but at the same time, like, I want to be upset if we had a new guy in there, and a new quarterback especially. I mean, Kenny Pickett, this dude is not going to cut it as the franchise quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers when you're in a division that has Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow. And although Deshaun Watson isn't what he used to be, he's still better than Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett is a backup quarterback at best. And he could be a really good backup quarterback. But being a really good backup quarterback doesn't win you a Super Bowl. He ain't Nick Foles. Hell, I'd rather have Nick Foles than Kenny Pickett. Anybody else at this point, I'm willing to give a go other than Kenny Pickett. This dude just is not it. He's a good person. He seems like a nice guy. And I feel bad for him watching these post-game press conferences. And he has that sad look on his face. Like, this dude looked defeated in his post-game presser after they lost to the Browns 13-10. And I felt bad. And, you know, like, people get on social media and they spew the whole sentiment about, man, these football players are more than just football players. They're humans, too. Like, they got emotions, too. Like, okay, so what? You expect me to feel bad for a dude who's getting paid millions of dollars to throw a football and can't do that job at a high level? Save me the tears. Save me the tissues. Like, I don't care. I want a dude who can go out there and get the job done. If I got paid $1 million to throw the football for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you guys would expect me to do that job at a high level. You see, Kenny Pickett, I don't want to hear no more excuses about Matt Canada holding him back. Like, Matt Canada, he's not the solution. He's definitely part of the problem too. But let's not act like Kenny Pickett isn't part of the problem either. Both of these guys, it's a collective effort that's holding this team back. And with this team being as good as what it has been, in spite of a bad quarterback and a bad OC, imagine how good this team would be if you had a better quarterback and a better OC. This damn near could be a team that could win it all. Kenny Pickett, I'm out on this dude as a starting quarterback for the Steelers. I tried to give him a chance. You know, like, when we drafted him, I never wanted him. You guys can go through my shorts and you guys can see that my reaction to drafting Kenny Pickett was not a good one. I was really disappointed. I really wanted Malik Willis. And although Malik Willis, he hasn't proven to be anything special neither, I would have loved to see him in the black and gold with the competent coaching staff. At least he has some athleticism. You can find ways to win with Malik Willis' athleticism. But, I mean, at the end of the day, this dude just isn't it. And I don't think it takes 3 to 4 years anymore to figure out when the guy you have at quarterback just isn't it. Even with a better OC. Kenny Pickett at best is a top 23 quarterback. That's not good enough to win you a championship. He isn't cut to be the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers for the foreseeable future. Before we move on to our next couple of topics, if you haven't already and you're tuned in, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Remember that we're not just a YouTube channel. Every episode of the podcast is available in audio format on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you're enjoying this episode, we will greatly appreciate it if you take your smartphone, go to Apple or Spotify, type in the JT Sports Podcast, and give us a 5-star review, man. It only takes less than 15 seconds to do. It's a free way to support the channel. Go ahead and give us a 5-star review if you're enjoying the content, you love the content that we're pushing out, and you want to support the podcast. Now, before we move on, if you guys didn't peep, we got a sponsor on the channel. So this company from Amazon, they hit me up on Gmail, and they was like, hey, like, can you promote this product for us? And it's this Galaxy Star Projector, which is the background light that you see in the background. So I'm about to play like a short 40-second ad of that thing. Go ahead, cop you one. Christmas is just around the corner. Get you a Galaxy Star Projector. It's a great gift for the holidays to give to your kids or a loved one to spice up your room. Go ahead and cop you one. That ad's about to play, and right after it gets done, we're going to move on to some other topics. Man, are you tired of looking at your stale, boring-ass room? You want to know a way you can spice your room up and turn that thing into an out-of-this-galaxy experience? Click the link in the description or pinned comment and grab you a Starry Projector Light. The Starry Projector Light comes with 10 changeable color options, a built-in Bluetooth speaker, 12 and 15 switchable constellations, planets, moons, and stars. Transform your room from a depressing wasteland into a vibrant starry wonderland. The Starry Projector Light makes for a great holiday gift for family, friends, and loved ones. Click the link in the description or pinned comment and get one today and transform your room into a breathtaking starry wonderland. USC suffered a really ugly loss to UCLA. And when you look at Lincoln Riley and you think about USC making the transition from the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, you got to be really concerned if you're a Trojans fan. Because the biggest knocks on Lincoln Riley and what this USC team has been this year doesn't translate to them having a lot of success in the Big Ten. You know, this team is soft, they lack physicality, and they don't have a lot of toughness. And when you go to the Big Ten and you got to go up against Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State, you got to be ready to go to war. Like when you play Michigan, you're not just getting ready for a football game, you're getting ready for a battle. And if you don't have the dudes up front and you don't have toughness and physicality, you're going to get ran over in the Big Ten. And Lincoln Riley, this season is a major disappointment. Okay, I didn't have these boys making it to the college football playoffs, but I didn't think they would be a non-factor in the Pac-12 this year. They got embarrassed by Utah. They got shredded by a pig farmer at quarterback. Then you lose to your rival. You lost to Washington. You had Caleb Williams crying, which ultimately led to you firing Alex Grinch. I mean, Lincoln Riley, this dude has to have the hottest seat in America in 2024. Now, I'm not going to go as far to say that you got to fire this dude right now, because this dude still is one of the best offensive minds in college football, and USC's offense is still amongst the best in the nation when they're playing at a high level, but there's an identity crisis with this program. And it's not really a USC thing, it's a Lincoln Riley thing. For some reason, his teams, they don't play defense, they don't care about defense, and they don't have a lot of toughness or physicality. When it comes to the offensive line, I believe he's going to get that thing fixed. Because even when he was coaching at Oklahoma, they always had really good offensive lines, and they put a lot of talented players in the NFL back at his time when he was coaching for the Sooners. The offensive line, he can get that figured out. And he's going to have to get that figured out when he's going to the Big Ten and you're going against some of the most physical and biggest defensive lines in the nation. Penn State, they got a lot of NFL guys on their defensive line. Same thing with Michigan and Ohio State. USC, they gave up a lot to steal this dude from Oklahoma. And Oklahoma fans, they warned USC fans about this dude. And he comes from the Mike Leach coaching tree. And I love Mike Leach. RIP to him. I was really devastated when he passed because he was my favorite head coach of all time. I loved him. And the dudes that come under Mike Leach, their philosophy is all offense. We don't give a damn about defense. The only Mike Leach disciple that cares a little bit about defense and being physical is Josh Heupel at Tennessee. He's the only one that understands that when you're playing in the Big Ten or in the SEC, being air raid isn't going to be good enough to get you over the top. You got to be able to run the football. You got to have some big boys up front that can hold their own against some of the most imposing defensive lines in the nation. And you got to be able to play somewhat of a little bit of defense. Lincoln Riley doesn't need to have a top 10, top 15 defense to win it all. At best, all he needs is a top 50 defense. That's what Washington has. Oregon has a slightly better defense than Washington, but you don't need to have an elite offense and an elite defense to win it all. All you need is an offense that can score points and a defense that can get some key stops. USC, they could even get key stops this year. And coming into this season, I gave Alex Grinch the benefit of a doubt because of all the dudes that they acquired from the transfer portal, but it doesn't matter how talented of a team you have and how many 5- and 4-star players you have if you don't have good coaching. Lincoln Riley needs to go out there, do some really deep searching to find him a good defensive coordinator. Money isn't an issue for USC. They got deep pockets over there. It's Hollywood. It's Los Angeles, people. What do they call it? The city of sins? Well, the biggest sin that Lincoln Riley committed this year was allowing Alex Grinch to coach up this defense for another season. This is one of the worst defenses that I've ever seen a team like USC have. They got too much money and too much resources to allow this defense to be as bad as what it has been this season. And the fact that they lost to UCLA when Chip Kelly's job was pretty much on the line going into that game, USC was a 6.5-point favorite. Chip Kelly, it was reports leading up to that game that was going to be his last ever game as the head coach of UCLA football. And then all of a sudden, they get smacked in the mouth. Like UCLA, they bullied USC around for the whole entire game. All right, now USC's defense, they were able to get some stops, but it didn't really matter because the offense went flat. And I get tired of people trying to pin all of USC's losses on Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams doesn't play defense. Caleb Williams scored a touchdown that put USC up against Utah just for their defense to allow a pig farmer to put Utah in field goal range to go ahead and win that game. Against Washington, their defense couldn't get a stop to save their life. Lincoln Riley was looking at Alex Grinch like, bro, you got that play call sheet? Call something to get us off the field, man. What are you doing? We need to get the offense back out there. And he couldn't do that. Same thing against Oregon. It's like, Lincoln Riley, I still believe in this dude. This dude is still a really good head coach to me. He's a good recruiter and one of the greatest offensive minds that we've seen in the past decade in college football. For the people that are saying, oh, well, this dude got gifted Heisman Trophy winners at Oklahoma, that makes no sense to me. So you mean to tell me that Baker Mayfield was just gifted to Lincoln Riley and Baker Mayfield made Lincoln Riley? Like, Baker Mayfield, if I recall, was a walk-on from Texas Tech. And although he played pretty well there, he transferred to Oklahoma. And Lincoln Riley got that dude into the NFL as a first-round pick. Same thing with Kyler Murray. Even though Kyler Murray was probably the second most talented quarterback he ever had, every single quarterback that plays for Lincoln Riley gets drafted really high in the NFL. All his receivers get drafted pretty high as well, along with his offensive linemen and his running backs. It's like, you see, the problem with Lincoln Riley isn't offense. All he needs to do is improve that offensive line, which he is going to do. He's gotten several guys drafted on the offensive line in the past, even when he was back coaching at Oklahoma. Like, didn't Creed Humphrey come from Oklahoma? Same thing with a guy named Cody Ford, who played offensive tackle. They put numerous offensive linemen in the NFL. The problem with Lincoln Riley is not the offense. He's going to get that O-line fixed. The problem is this dude doesn't give a fuck about defense. We need this dude to care about defense. Defense wins championships, people. Yeah, you need a great offense to score. The saying is, offense scores points, defense wins games. Offense sells tickets, defense wins championships. In the Big Ten, you're not going to be able to win games by just outscoring everybody if you don't have a great defense. Teams like Michigan and Penn State and Ohio State, they're going to run the ball down your throat, take a lot of time off the clock, and also they have good enough defenses to be able to contain your offenses. Lincoln Riley, this dude is definitely on the hot seat going into 2024. He has the hottest seat of any other head coach in America going into next year. Hotter than Mario Cristobal, hotter than Billy Napier, because you're at USC. It's not that hard to get a good defensive coordinator when you got enough money that you can pretty much steal a defensive coordinator from nearly any school in America outside of the top programs like Ohio State and Michigan or whatnot. Hell, go to the NFL and try to steal a rising assistant. Do something. Hell, try to steal the defensive coordinator from USC, Dan Lynn, the son of Anthony Lynn, a former head coach in the NFL. Like, UCLA, they're like $100 million and something in debt. The last time I read that article about them. And the reason why they made the move to the Big Ten. So just go ahead and make Dan Lynn the highest paid defensive coordinator in college football and get that thing rolling, man. Lincoln Riley, I don't think this dude is going to get fired after this season. He shouldn't be fired. Although this is a really disappointing season and losing to UCLA in this fashion definitely is a fireable offense. But this dude is still a really good recruiter. He's the best offensive mind in the sport. There's no reason to get rid of this dude. His biggest problem is the fact that he needs to get a better defensive coordinator and he needs to change the mentality of his program. Lincoln Riley is more built towards a finesse style of football. If he was coaching in the old school Big 12, which was all defense, all offense and no defense, he would be perfect. And he was perfect. But when you're making the transition to the Big 10, against conferences that have a lot of talent and size and athleticism on defense, You got to be able to slow some of those guys down in your own right. You got to have a defense of your own that can rival Michigan and Ohio State and then Penn State. You know, when you're playing in a Big Ten in the middle portion of the country, you got to be ready to go to war. You got to be ready for a dogfight. You got to be ready for battle. And Lincoln Riley, these USC teams that I've seen the last 2 years, they would get shredded by Michigan or Ohio State or Penn State. So next year, with the change in conference due to conference realignment, Lincoln Riley has to get that defense figured out. And he definitely should be on the hot seat because regardless of, you know, what the preseason expectations were, we mostly thought that the floor for USC, the worst case scenario for them was 9 wins. And a 9-win season would have been that bad. But to have only 7 wins and you potentially are going to be playing in the Sun Bowl or the Duke Mayo Bowl is embarrassing. USC is one of those programs that they should be playing in the biggest games and the biggest bowl games on the biggest stages. And the fact that they're going to be matched up against a G5 program or a low-end P5 program in a meaningless bowl game, well, I'm not going to call it meaningless because I enjoy bowl season, and I will watch whatever bowl game USC plays in because I'm just a diehard college football fan like that. But seeing USC in the Duke Mayo Bowl, the Sun Bowl, the Tony the Tiger Bowl, like the Pinstripe Bowl, hey, I go to FAU. Imagine if USC is playing in the Boca Raton Bowl. Oh my goodness, man. Like, Lincoln Riley, fix this defense, man. Please fix this defense. But without a doubt, this dude is on the hot. JJ McCarthy, you know, a lot of people are really high on this dude for some reason. Many people feel like he can be a first-round pick in the 2024 NFL draft. But anytime I watch JJ McCarthy against a good team, this dude does not look that good to me. And you can call me a hater all you want to, but I'm just finna tell you the real. Anytime JJ McCarthy is put in situations when he has to carry Michigan to a win, he's unable to being able to do it. Last year, when they lost in the semifinals in upset fashion to TCU, he wasn't good in that game. He threw an interception, a costly pick six, and he only completed 58% of his passes. Against Maryland last week, he went 12 of 23. He completed 52% of his passes. He threw a costly interception before halftime in the red zone. And last year, against Ohio State, his best game of that season last year, when he threw 3 touchdowns, he wasn't even good in that game. You know, like outside of the busted coverages that Ohio State had, JJ McCarthy was nothing special. He completed 50% of his passes in that game. Against Penn State this season, he only threw the ball 8 times. There's a reason why Michigan chose not to throw the football that much in the game. And it wasn't because the run game was that dominant. The run game was impressive, but anytime you only throw 8 passes in the game and you run the ball 30 times consecutively to end the game, that's a sign that you don't trust your quarterback. And I don't trust JJ McCarthy against Ohio State. He's Michigan's biggest weakness. Michigan has a great defense, a great offensive line, and a pretty talented group of wide receivers. And we know about the talent that they have at running back in Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. That's the best 1-2 punch in America. But if Ohio State slows down the rushing attack of Michigan, and this becomes a game that Michigan has to lean on JJ McCarthy's arm to win, they're going to lose, and they're going to lose in embarrassing fashion. This dude is not as good as a quarterback as what a lot of people make him out to be. He has a really good arm and great athleticism, but he doesn't read defenses properly. Sometimes he takes too long to throw the football on timing routes. Like, there was an interception that he threw against TCU that got took to the house on the out route because he took too long to throw that thing. JJ McCarthy, he has a lot to prove against Ohio State. Like, I'm tired of people overhyping this guy when his best performances have came against terrible teams. Against Penn State, I'm not going to harp on him too bad because he did go 7-8 and there was really no need to throw the football. But against Maryland, he sucked. And if you're a Michigan fan, I know you're going to come down in the comment section and you're going to defend JJ McCarthy. Oh, well, he threw 3 touchdowns against Ohio State last year. Oh, who cares about his stats against Penn State? We got the win. Let me tell you something. Ohio State and Ryan Day, y'all embarrassed these guys the last 2 years. You know, like, you guys were more physical than Ohio State. You guys just imposed your will on Ohio State. If you think that Ohio State is about to allow you to run the football 30 straight times consecutively the way you did against Penn State, you're going to be in for a rude reality check. And I expect Ryan Day to have these guys really amped up. You know, if I'm Ryan Day, I'm giving one of the most passionate, one of the most emotional pregame speeches in football history. Hell, if I'm Ryan Day, I might just go out there and pay a little bit of cash to Ray Lewis to come to get me a little bit amped up for this game. But Ohio State, those guys are going to be really amped up. They're going to be coming into this game looking to make a statement after you've embarrassed them the past 2 years. And I doubt that Ohio State is going to allow Michigan to win this game the same way they did against Penn State. And Ohio State's defensive line is way too good for that to happen. And their defensive coordinator, Jim Knowles, like, this dude has tremendously turned around this defense. I doubt that Ohio State is going to allow Michigan to come into that game and just do their bread and butter, run the football 40, 50 times down their throat. That's not going to happen. And I'm willing to put money that happens. Like, I'm willing to put money that Michigan doesn't have more than 120 yards rushing in this game. I doubt that Michigan's going to win this game throwing the football less than 10 times. And I'm willing to put as much money on the line as you're willing to bet with me and that you're willing to pay. Like, if you think that Michigan can win this game throwing the football less than 10 times, please DM me on Instagram and X. You see the handles down below. Like, please DM me because I would love to take your money. This Ohio State team, they're going to be way too juiced up, way too amped up for Michigan just to run the football and just out-physical them for a third straight year in a row. JJ McCarthy needs to go out there. He needs to make some big-time throws. And you're not going against the same Ohio State defense when you had blown coverages and missed assignments last year. You're going up against one of the best defenses in college football. Look, Kyle McCord, this dude isn't nothing to write home about neither. I would take JJ McCarthy over Kyle McCord. I'm not saying this dude is garbage, but he's not one of the best quarterbacks in college football like people hype him up to be. Hell, I was on Reddit a couple of days ago, and you wouldn't believe the post I came across. Caleb Williams is overrated. Like, when the draft process comes around, I will put JJ McCarthy over him. Like, fool, are you crazy? Like, stop scouting football. Stop trying to be a GM or a scout if you think that JJ McCarthy is better than Caleb Williams. Like, there's no way in hell if Michigan had the opportunity to choose between JJ McCarthy and Caleb Williams that they will pick JJ McCarthy over Caleb Williams. That's insanity. But this is the kind of talk that I've been hearing about JJ McCarthy. I've seen him in the first round of nearly every single mock draft that I come across every morning. Like, JJ McCarthy is not that good. He needs to prove himself against Ohio State this year. Fuck what he did last year. That was last year, and he wasn't even good in that game. A lot of his plays came on busted coverages. He hasn't completed higher than 50% of his passes and the majority of games that they played against a competent team. I want to see him have a game when he can come out and go 17 to 24 passing for 250 yards and 2 touchdowns and no picks. I just need to see more out of JJ McCarthy because the hype that he's getting is not deserved. Like, this dude has been good against Bowling Green and Indiana, the bottom feeders of the Big Ten and college football. But against Penn State, yeah, he went 7-8. You didn't need to throw the football. But against Maryland on the road, this dude looked like he was shot. He needs to prove himself against Ohio State. Like, Kyle McCord isn't nothing to write home about neither. But the difference between Kyle McCord and JJ McCarthy is that JJ McCarthy doesn't have a Maserati Marv that he can lean on when the offense goes flat. Kyle McCord's job is not that hard. Throw the football to Marvin Harrison Jr. and make sure that you don't turn it over, and that's it. JJ McCarthy, Roman Wilson is a solid wide receiver, but he's nowhere close to Marvin Harrison Jr. You see, JJ McCarthy, if Michigan gets in a situation when that run game isn't going and they need him to carry them to a win, I don't trust him to get it done. I think he's the biggest weakness of Michigan football going into this big-time matchup against Ohio State. And Jim Harbaugh isn't going to be on the sideline either. So let's say JJ McCarthy gets out to a slow start. Who's going to be able to pick him up? Who's going to be able to get him juice? Because it seems like the dude who has the most belief in JJ McCarthy is Jim Harbaugh. And he's not going to be on the sideline for that game. JJ McCarthy, he's the biggest weakness for the Wolverines going into this matchup against Ohio State. And it may seem like I'm hating on JJ McCarthy, but if you actually watch these games and if you're a Michigan fan and you can actually put your fandom aside and be subjective, you probably would agree that JJ McCarthy doesn't play his best football in some of Michigan's best games. Michigan's identity is running the football. And if Ohio State takes that away, I feel really confident about the Buckeyes walking away with this victory. Coach Prime and Colorado, they got embarrassed and humiliated in Pullman, Washington. Oh my goodness. They lost 56-14. And with that loss, they are now out of contention to be bowl eligible. And there was somebody that hit me up in the DMs on Twitter that asked me, JT, is Colorado's season a disappointment, not making it to a bowl game year one under Coach Prime? And you see, a lot of people keep saying that Coach Prime didn't live up to the hype. Like, what do you mean he didn't live up to the hype? This was a team that only won one game last season. They tripled that in their first 3 weeks playing. Now, albeit, you would have loved for them to be able to win more than 4 games, and you would have loved for them to be competitive against Washington State, and you expected them to beat Stanford. You lost those games, and it wasn't all due to talent. A lot of those losses that Colorado has suffered down the stretch has been due to poor coaching. And I don't think Deion Sanders is a bad coach, but he's not as good as a coach as I initially thought he was coming into this season. And you see, when he was at Jackson State, he was a big fish in a small pond. Coaching in the SWAC is way different from coaching Power 5 football in the Pac-12. And the Pac-12 has been a fantastic conference this year. And you definitely could see that in a lot of games that Colorado lost, like against Oregon and Oregon State, they were outmatched physically and talent-wise. All right, we get that. But at the end of the day, this season, when you look at it from an overall big lens, it's still a success. I don't consider this season to be a disappointment. Now, I had Colorado winning 6 games this year, all because I thought that they would be able to at least beat Stanford and beat Washington State, but that didn't happen. But even though they didn't live up to my preseason prediction, in hindsight, I still understood the kind of job that Deion Sanders was walking into. You're not going to be able to field a great team with just a team that you just assembled from the transfer portal. You got to be able to recruit. You got to be able to develop. And, of course, you got to mix that in with getting a couple of guys here and there from the transfer portal, similar to Florida State. When you look at the teams that have built their squads through the transfer portal, such as USC and LSU, they had a lot of success year one, but look what those teams did in year 2. USC only won 7 games. LSU didn't even come close to sniffing the SEC West title like they did year 1 under Brian Kelly. Coach Prime season at Colorado is still a pretty big success, considering the fact that this team won 1 game last year. They were arguably the worst program in college football last season. He came in there and he won 4 games, and he gave this school a lot of juice, a lot of hype, a lot of momentum when they got out to that fast 3-0 start. And a lot of people recalibrated their expectations. Hell, even I kind of was looking at Colorado a little bit differently when they started out 3-0, and I picked them to beat TCU. So, with Colorado getting out to such a fast start, people who don't really follow college football like that, they were like, oh shit, like, Colorado looks like a really good team. Let's see what these boys do with all the hype now. And then they came back down to earth. And after that, they only won 1 game since they started out 4-0. And I think that Coach Prime, the things that he needs to work on is making sure that his team is more locked in on the game and not so focused on the lights, the cameras, and the social media praise and the social media recognition. What they did before that game against Oregon was unexcusable. They deserve that ass whooping that Oregon gave them. When you have your players stomping and dancing on the opposing team's logo, disrespecting them, you deserve to get embarrassed and you deserve to get humiliated. And when Dan Lanning in that pregame speech said that the Cinderella story is over, he meant it. Not only did they end Colorado's win streak, but they also ended and derailed all the hype that Colorado had gained up to that point. And then you started to realize the more you watch Colorado's games, Coach Prime's flaws. Even his recruiting hasn't been that good. Like, before I even went on live, like, I read something that they just had somebody flip from Colorado to somebody else. Coach Prime's recruiting isn't even in the top 50 right now. I thought that he would be a way better recruiter than what he is, at least at this moment. I thought that, despite the fact that you're coaching at Colorado and it's kind of hard to sell people on the idea of wanting to go to Boulder, Colorado, I thought with the fact that he's Deion Sanders, that would be enough that he could at least be better than what the recruiting class currently is. I mean, they're not even in the top 50 right now, and it's going to take a lot of miracles on National Signing Day for this to turn into a top 25 class. This season isn't a disappointment, though. It's a little bit of a disappointment when you realize that Deion Sanders isn't as good as a coach as most people thought he was, myself included. But it's still a big success considering the fact that this team won 4 games. What makes it a disappointment is that you could have had more. And I guess that's where the people who say this is a massive disappointment, he was making statements that his mouth couldn't cash or whatever people say to hate on Deion Sanders, I can kind of understand where some of those people are coming from. And they got a point. Like when they were 3-0 and they were super confident and they were talking and he was saying, if our confidence offends your insecurity, then that's a you problem. I get that, because at one point it kind of did seem like this became more of a movie than it was about football. And I was telling my homeboy when I was describing Colorado, who doesn't really watch college football like that, he was trying to understand like why is Deion Sanders getting so much hate despite the fact that they only won 1 game last year. And I told him it's because when he started out 3-0, that's probably the worst thing that could have happened to this team, because their fast start forced everybody to forget what they were last year and what the realistic expectations were. They were projected to win 3.5 games this year. You know how much money I won off of Colorado winning 4 games this year? That was the lock of the century. But it's just the fact that they started out 3-0, and then people start to relook at them and say, man, they're 3-0, like they probably could win it all this year, or they probably could win 8-9 games this year. And then once they started to play the tough teams on their schedule like Oregon and USC and Oregon State and UCLA, you could tell that they were outmatched. But you could also tell in those games against Stanford and Washington State that, coaching was also a big issue as well. And Coach Prime, his clock management isn't good. He doesn't make great in-game adjustments, and his ego is a big reason why Colorado is not going bowling this year. Them winning 6 games was not an unrealistic expectation like how a lot of people try to tell me. Look, I'm a big fan of Deion Sanders, but at the same time, I'm also subjective with how I talk about him, how I view him, and I'm also pretty reasonable. I don't think it was unreasonable to expect them to win 6 games when they could have beaten Stanford and they could have beaten Washington State. Unless Shedeur Sanders would have gotten injured in either one of those games, which he did against Washington State. And obviously, we knew that Shedeur Sanders was a big part of why Colorado was able to have the success that they had early on this season. But really, when you think about this team, it only was built on 2 things. Great receivers on the outside and Shedeur Sanders. That was about it. No offensive line and pretty much no defense, although the defense did play well for the past couple of games prior to this Washington State loss. But overall, if you were to zoom out on this season and you look at this team from a 180-degree lens, this is still a pretty successful season. I wouldn't view this season as a disappointment, only because, Colorado wasn't expected to even win 4 games this year. Most people thought that they would be lucky enough to win 2 or 3 maybe. So they exceeded expectations. Deion Sanders still overachieved to this point. He did what he needed to do. He got this team to a place when they got some hope. They got some promise. They got a lot of media attention. They got a lot of eyes on them now. Now he needs to improve his recruiting, improve as a head coach, fire a couple of guys on that coaching staff, bring in some better guys who can find a way to get this offensive line playing at a better level, and try to find a better offensive coordinator, although I don't believe that Sean Lewis was the issue. But Deion Sanders, his first season isn't a disappointment in my opinion. I think that this was a pretty successful season. If you thought that Deion Sanders was going to be able to win 8-9 games out the gate, you had too high expectations and you don't really follow college football all that closely. And I know that a lot of people that follow the Colorado program mostly are following it because of Deion Sanders. There's not really a lot of true diehard Colorado fans that I see in my comment section that often. Most of the times it's casual fans of college football or people that don't really watch college football all that much that only are watching to either support Deion Sanders or hate on Deion Sanders. And if you really follow college football and if you're a diehard Colorado fan, you're happy with the progress that Deion Sanders made in his first season. And you got a lot of reason to be optimistic going into the Big 12, a conference that probably is more of a mystery and is a lot less tougher than what the Pac-12 has been this year. Like, Deion Sanders rocked into a really tough conference. Like, who would have thought that the Pac-12 in their final season of existence would be as competitive as what it's been? So that didn't really do him no favors neither. Like, if he was playing in the Big 12 or in the ACC, there was a good chance that Colorado probably could have pulled off 2-3 more wins and they could have won 6-7 games. But with how tough this conference is and the fact that he pretty much had to build a team through scratch, the expectations really weren't all that high. And he pretty much overachieved because they were only expected to win 3 games. Winning 4 games is an accomplishment. And I look at this season as still a success. Although he'll probably tell you that it was a little bit disappointing because they probably would have loved to be bowl eligible, and they definitely could have been. It's like they were at the dinner table and they didn't eat all their food. They left a couple of crumbs on their plate. That's what Colorado's season was, in my opinion. A couple of days ago, I saw Colin Cowherd on his podcast with the volume say that the new look Big Ten is going to dominate the SEC. And I strongly disagree with that. His arguments were not that great, in my opinion. He was saying the ratings are going to be better. More people are going to want to tune in to Oregon and Michigan than they are when it comes to these SEC matchups. Did you guys know that the majority of college football's most viewed games have come from the SEC conference? Like, I think that a lot of people forget that college football runs through the South. The South, not only do they have the best teams in college football, not only is the SEC the best conference in the football, but the South is the best place to finding the best talent in America. Florida, Texas, Georgia all produce some of the best athletes in America, and they produce a lot of NFL players. And when you look at the SEC going into 2024, yeah, they're not bringing in a bunch of teams like the Big Ten is with USC, Washington, Oregon, and UCLA, but Oklahoma and Texas are 2 really big names. And when you look at the upcoming SEC schedule for next season, there's more marquee matchups in the Southeastern Conference in 2024 than there are in the Big Ten. The Big Ten only really has like 3 big name teams that everybody knows about: Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan. And then you bring in Washington, USC, and Oregon. Those are 3 more additional big names to bring into the conference. But outside of them, there's not really a lot of great teams in the Big Ten. The SEC, not only is it the most talented conference in America, but it's the deepest. And not just that, but majority of college football's most passionate fans and biggest fan bases, they're in the SEC. It is not just the Alabamas, the LSUs, and the Georgias of the world. Tennessee has a really big fan base. Florida has a really big fan base. South Carolina and Arkansas have really big fan bases. Hell, even Texas A&M. Texas A&M and Alabama was one of the most viewed games this season. And then when Texas A&M has to play Texas next year, that's going to do massive ratings. Georgia, Texas is going to do huge ratings. Florida, Texas is going to do tremendous ratings. Same thing with Alabama, Oklahoma. Meanwhile, you look at the Big Ten, you got Michigan, USC, Michigan, Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, USC. Like, it's only really 4 teams that make up the majority of the biggest games that the Big Ten is going to be playing in next year. Like, unless you're a fan of one of those 4 teams or you're just interested in those matchups because of how big they are, that's about it. You know, Colin's argument was that there's going to be a bigger variety of big games to watch in the Big Ten in 2024 compared to the SEC, and that's simply not true. Like, the SEC, the South, has the biggest fan bases in college football. College football runs through the South. Regardless where you're from, regardless if you're from the middle portion of the country, the eastern part of the country, or if you're a Western fan of college football, if you're unbiased and you don't really have affiliation towards a conference, even you will admit that the SEC runs college football. Nearly every single season, the SEC is winning the SEC championship game, or either has 1 or 2 teams in the college football playoffs. And with the playoffs expanding to 12 teams, it's going to be nothing more than a Big Ten SEC invitational pretty much. And the SEC is still going to come on top. Like, people blow me when they say the SEC is overrated. No, it's not. You put Tennessee in the Big Ten, and they're competing right along with Ohio State and Michigan. Now, they probably want to win the conference over those teams, but they probably would still be up there. You put Tennessee in the Pac-12, they probably would be in contention to win that thing too. Same thing with the Big 12 and the ACC. Hell, if you put Arkansas in the Big Ten, they're probably competing with Penn State for the right to be the 3rd best team in that conference. You see, like, you can't judge every team in the SEC based on their record. A lot of teams in the SEC that are bad are only bad because they're playing a gauntlet of a schedule. Like Auburn, bro, they got to play Georgia and Alabama every single year. You see, the SEC has the most passionate fan bases in all of college football. And they got the largest fan bases in the country. Like, you talk about Arkansas, you want to believe the amount of Arkansas fans there are in this world. Same thing with South Carolina. Same thing with the Florida Gators. Same thing even a little bit with Kentucky. Even they got a pretty passionate college football fan base. I think that the SEC is going to dominate the new look Big Ten. Because the Big Ten, their highest rated games have been when they played Notre Dame, Ohio State, Notre Dame. When Michigan plays Ohio State, that's probably going to be the most watched game of this year. And anytime Penn State, Michigan play, or Penn State, Ohio State play, and when Washington, Penn State, and when USC, Michigan, or Oregon, Michigan play, yeah, people are going to watch those games. But the SEC still has a larger amount of games to watch and to pick from. Like, people are going to be interested in seeing Florida versus Texas. Not just because Texas is a good team or Florida is a good team. Like, Florida could have a down year next year, and people still tune into that game because it's Florida, Texas. Those are 2 of the states that produce the most talent when it comes to getting guys into the NFL. And the majority of teams that win national championships have a lot of players either from those 2 states. Like, everybody's going to be tuning in to watch Texas A&M and Texas play. That's one of the biggest in-state rivalries in all of college football. You got Texas A&M going up against Texas. I can't wait for that matchup. It's like the Big Ten is going to have a couple of exciting games, but I think Colin Cowherd, he's more focused on the big name programs in the Big Ten. Like, nobody's going to be watching anytime Oregon and Maryland play. Who gives a fuck? Like, in the SEC, everybody's going to be tuning in, and the majority of the SEC's biggest games don't always include Alabama or Georgia. Like, there are a lot of SEC games that do a good amount of traction because the South is the biggest fan base and the biggest supporters of college football. And if you disagree with that, go do your research. The South runs college football. So I think that the SEC is going to dominate the new look Big Ten, and I strongly disagree with Colin Cowherd's take. And it wasn't all rooted about who was better. It was more rooted in which one was going to be a better television product. When you look at who has the highest viewership from this season, the SEC dominates. And it's not even close. They got like 20 games that have been the most viewed. compared to the Big Ten only having a couple, and then the other conferences don't even come close to the Big Ten and SEC. The SEC still reigns supreme in terms of viewership numbers and in terms of finding more competitive games that people are going to be compelled to watch. Like, I think a lot of people will be really surprised how big of a fan base the Florida Gators actually have. I love talking about Florida, and I'm going to continue to talk about them. And, you know, like, even when you look at Texas and Oklahoma coming into the conference, like, there still was a conference that a lot of people were still truly invested in prior to those two teams arriving on the scene. And it took Texas and Oklahoma leaving and joining the SEC for this whole entire wave of conference realignment to begin with anyway. And if we're talking about who's a better conference, top to bottom, from a talent standpoint, it's not even close. But his argument wasn't really based on that. It was more based on viewership and ratings, and the SEC is still going to bring in a lot of viewership, and they're still going to dominate the Big Ten in ratings just because they just have more depth in that conference, and they have more great teams in that conference. So I disagree with Colin Cowherd on that take. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, we'll greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Also, subscribe to the podcast. You can find this podcast on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. You can find the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I will see you guys tomorrow with another episode of JT Sports Live.